The CSS Relentless looked like it was dying. This was intentional. The drive signature was wrong, irregular pulses instead of the smooth output of a functional propulsion system, consistent with a fractured drive manifold. The shield emitters were reading at 11%, which the Keth scanner profiles would classify as catastrophic failure. 2 of the port weapon arrays had gone dark. The emergency beacon was cycling, which was the specific signal of a vessel whose crew knew they were in trouble and had decided that broadcasting their location was worth the risk. To every sensor on every vessel in the Keth Sovereignty fleet that had cornered her in the Kurth Narrows. The CSS Relentless looked like a ship 40 minutes from being a debris field. To Commander Yael Vasquez, standing at the tactical station on the bridge of the Relentless, it looked like the most important performance of her career. She said, "Kofi, drive signature." Her chief engineer said, "Holding the pattern, Commander. Irregular at 11-second intervals." She paused. "The Keth's passives are definitely reading it." She said, "How long can we hold this before something actually breaks from pretending to be broken?" He said, 40 minutes. "Maybe 50, if we're gentle." She looked at the tactical display. 16 Keth vessels. Not all warships. 3 were support and logistics. But the warships were significant. 2 heavy cruisers, 5 destroyers, 6 frigates. The formation was a standard containment pattern, which told her they were planning to wait rather than immediately engage. They were waiting for her to die on her own. She had given them a very good reason to wait. She said, "They're not moving to intercept." Her tactical officer said, "No, Commander. Formation is holding at 14 kilometers. Standard containment." She paused. "They're watching us." Vasquez looked at the display for a long moment. 14 kilometers. The Relentless's weapons range at full power was 16 kilometers. At 11% shields, the Keth tactical analysis would have calculated an engagement at current range as certain destruction for the Relentless, even if she managed to get shots off. At 11% shields, engaging was suicide. At 11% shields, that were actually 94% shields in standby mode. Waiting for the exact right moment, that was something else entirely. She said, "Status on the package." Her intelligence officer said, confirmed aboard, "Commander, secure in the signal vault." She said, "And the relay point." Her intelligence officer said, 22 minutes at the transit velocity we need." She paused. "If we're going to make the relay, we need to start in approximately 9 minutes. Nini minutis. 40 minutes of believable failure before something actually failed. 16 Keth ships that were watching a crippled vessel die and making no move to intercept. She had 9 minutes to make a decision that looked, from the outside, like a dead ship making one last desperate run. That was the point. The CSS Relentless had been carrying the signal package for 4 days. She hadn't known about it until day 2, when her intelligence officer had come to her with a sealed order from Fleet Command that had been embedded in the vessel's routine communication cache since departure, hidden in administrative noise, until a specific timestamp triggered its decryption. The order had explained 3 things. First, the Relentless was carrying a signal package in its secure vault that contained the complete intelligence file on the Keth sovereignties. Planned offensive operations for the next 18 months. The file had been obtained by a source that Fleet Command was not going to name in the order. The file needed to reach the Concordance Council's intelligence division, which meant it needed to reach a relay point in the Kurth Narrows. Second, the Keth Sovereignty was aware that a Concordance vessel was carrying this file, though they did not know which vessel. They had deployed search assets in the Kurth Narrows region. Third, the method of delivery was Commander Vasquez's discretion. Fleet Command's recommendation was the direct approach. Vasquez's recommendation to herself, after reading the order and looking at the tactical picture, was that the direct approach was a good way to end up boarded. She had spent 2 days building a different approach. The approach required making the Relentless look like a vessel that had encountered a Keth search element and been crippled in the engagement. A crippled vessel in the Narrows was not a vessel carrying valuable intelligence. It was a vessel trying to survive. A crippled vessel didn't go to relay points. It went to the nearest safe harbor, or it drifted, or it died. None of those things involved successfully transmitting intelligence. She had spent 2 days making the Relentless look like it was dying. Her chief engineer had been magnificent. The drive signature mimicry was the most technically impressive thing she had watched anyone do in 17 years of fleet service. When the Keth containment force had arrived and taken their formation, she had known the deception was working. They were waiting for a dying ship to die. They were not watching for a perfectly functional vessel to run. Fleet Commander Galactic was patient by training and temperament. He had been in the Keth Sovereignty Fleet for 22 years. And the quality that distinguished his record from other officers with comparable experience was this: he did not hurry things that did not need to be hurried. An enemy that was crippled and dying did not need to be hurried. You waited, you confirmed, you collected what remained. The CSS Relentless was crippled and dying. His sensor suite was showing it clearly: the drive signature, the shield failure, the weapon's darkness. The cycling beacon. The pattern was consistent with a vessel that had encountered a minefield, or an ambush by a smaller element, or a critical system failure at the worst possible moment. The Concordance vessel was 40 minutes from total systems failure. He was going to wait 40 minutes. His second said, "The Relentless hasn't moved since we established the containment. Drive is still irregular." Grellisaeus said, "She's trying to stabilize. It won't work." He paused. "What's her heading?" His second said, "No coherent heading, sir." "The drive irregularity is producing drift." She paused. "She's moving, but not with intent." No intent. A dying ship moved like that, random, reactive, without the purpose of a vessel under directed command. He said, "Maintain formation. When she goes dark, we go in and collect what's recoverable." His second said, "Yes, sir." He looked at the Relentless on his display. He felt nothing in particular about what was happening. The Concordance vessel was an obstacle to his mission, which was to find and intercept whatever intelligence had been taken from sovereignty files. The Relentless had probably already transmitted it before she was crippled. He had to assume the intelligence was already in Concordance's hands and that the vessel itself was no longer the primary objective. But he was here, and she was here, and waiting was easy. He waited. At minute 7, Vasquez said, "Arm everything." Her tactical officer said, "Commander." She said, quietly. She paused. "Don't change the emission profile yet. Just arm it." The arming was internal. It changed nothing that the Keth sensors were reading. The weapons were armed behind the electromagnetic signature of failed systems, waiting in the dark like something held very carefully in a closed hand. She said, "Kofi, drive transition on my mark. I need standard power in 11 seconds. Her chief engineer said, "That's fast." She said, "I know. Can you do it?" He said, "Yes." "But they'll see the power spike." She said, "That's fine. By the time they process it, we'll be at full drive." She looked at the display. 14 kilometers. The containment formation was a standard pattern, which meant the gaps were predictable. The gap between the third frigate and the lead destroyer was the widest, 4.2 kilometers, and it pointed almost directly at the relay point. Almost. She needed a specific angle through that gap. That would require the Relentless to accelerate on a heading that would look, for the first 6 seconds, like a random drive surge from a ship that was losing control. She had 6 seconds of confusion before they understood what was happening. She said, "Navigation. I need the bearing for the relay point through the gap between Frigate 3 and Destroyer 1. Input it now, but don't execute." Her navigator said, "Bearing computed." She said, "Hold." She watched the formation on her display. 14 kilometers. The gap. The relay point 22 minutes beyond it. She said, "Mark." Grelesea saw the power spike at 0847. His sensor officer said, "Sir, the relentless power surge." He said, "She's destabilizing." "Prepare for," his sensor officer said, "Sir, the surge is not destabilization. The drive signature has normalized." He said, "What?" She said, "The drive signature is clean. Sir, full power." "She's accelerating." She paused. Bearing. She paused again, bearing for the gap between Frigate 3 and Destroyer 1. He stood. He said, "Intercept formation. Full power." She said, "Sir, shields are reading at 94%. She paused. Her pause had the quality of someone recalculating very quickly. "Sir, she was never at 11%. She was reading 11%. He was already running the numbers. 14 kilometers. The Relentless, at full drive, needed approximately 40 seconds to reach the gap. His nearest vessel, with 3, was at fully stoppy at 11 seconds, intercept velocity, and another 20 to reach the gap. Frigate 3 couldn't close the gap before the Relentless was through it. Destroyer 1 couldn't close the gap before the Relentless was through it. Nothing in his formation could close the gap before the Relentless was through it, because the formation had been built for a dying ship. Not for a ship that had been lying very still for 40 minutes waiting for exactly this moment. He said, "Fire on the Relentless. All vessels, fire." His weapons officer said, "Sir, the angle." He said, "All vessels, fire now." The formation opened up. 14 vessels. Weapons live. Firing on a target that was threading a 4-kilometer gap at full drive with 94% shields. Vasquez had expected fire. She had calculated the fire. The gap was for kilometers wide. The Relentless was 42 meters wide. She had 11,000 meters of margin and approximately 38 seconds to use it, during which the Keth formation would be firing from angles that were already partially occluded by their own formation geometry. The formation that worked for containing a dying ship was a formation that created friendly fire risk when shooting at a ship moving through it. She had calculated this too. The first shots came at second 9. 3 hits on the shields, which dropped from 94 to 71. She felt the impacts as sound and motion. She said, "Evasive, pattern 7. Don't slow down." Her helmsman said, "Pattern 7, aye." The Relentless moved through the gap like something that had been waiting in a closed hand and had finally been released. Second 17, through the gap. Second 18, full drive on the relay heading. Second 31, the Keth formation was behind her. The relay point was 20 minutes ahead, and her shields were at 68%. 68% was fine. She said, "Damage report." Her engineers said, "To shield emitters degraded. Minor hull stress from the Pattern 7 maneuver. Drive at full operational." She paused. She paused again. "Commander." He paused. "That was remarkable," she said. "What was remarkable?" He said, "The timing, the angle, the whole thing." He paused. "You built the performance for 9 minutes of observation before anyone fired a shot." She said, "I had 2 days to build it." He said, "Still," she looked at the relay point on her display. 19 minutes. Behind her, the Keth formation was attempting pursuit, which was the correct tactical response, and which was also going to arrive at the relay point. Approximately for minutes after she did, which was for minutes after the signal package had been transmitted, the performance was over. The ship that had been dying was alive and running and carrying something that would reach the concordance. Council's Intelligence Division in 19 minutes. She said, "Open the log." She paused. She said, "I want the record to show that at no point during this engagement was the CSS relentless at less than 68% shield capacity." Her intelligence officer said, "Logged, Commander." She said, "Good." She paused. "I don't want anyone thinking we were actually in trouble." She watched the relay point getting closer. 17 minutes. The Keth formation was 3 minutes behind schedule. That 3 minutes was everything.